Welcome back to Beer Time with Books.
Woo! Yeah.
It's been
Yay.
a hot minute. This is part 2 of the Underground Railroad, and the same crew is back. What's up, crew?
Same crew. Hey guys.
I hated that.
This is a good crew.
This is a good
it's
crew.
Great crew.
We got the Classic 3, and our guest is back.
Hello.
We're excited to get to the end of the Underground Railroad. This is our 6th book of the podcast, and we're excited to get into some of the things that we've been doing outside of the podcast since the last episode. So let's first start off with what we're drinking. Anybody want to go first?
I think we're all drinking the same thing.
We may be.
I'm pretty sure.
I mean, they're
there
all from
were
your
2
house.
options, but I think we all chose one of them.
Yeah.
It's because it
we
looks
go.
like Chiefs.
All right, you guys want to do it in unison?
Spirited.
1, 2, no, just
So
kidding.
we're all drinking the...
Kansas City Craft Brewers Red Lager.
This is a new thing. Like,
I've never seen this before.
It looks like a Chiefs jersey.
yeah, it does look like a Chiefs jersey. We have another one in the fridge, which I don't know, you guys are welcome to in the middle of the episode, but it's blue for the Royals. But yeah, this is a completely new beer. I think it's pretty tasty.
At the top, it says hot owned by Belgians.
Oh.
What does that mean?
I think
Hot owned.
not
No, not
Yeah,
owned.
it's not owned.
Not
Oh,
owned.
that is
does look like an
shade.
H.
That's shade, though, because
It looks like an H.
Also, it says yet.
hot owned by Belgians.
Boulevard is owned
I wish
by
it said hot
a
owned.
Belgian company, so they're just throwing
Oh, it's
shade.
not
Not Boulevard?
No.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is like a completely new
It's
thing.
just Kansas City Craft Brewers.
The shade.
There is, yeah, there is definitely
I also
shade.
prefer hot owned by Belgians.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
gonna say, I don't know what
That's
that
my
means,
new
but I'm into
I'm-
it.
My new
I'm here
Instagram
for it.
bio.
Well,
Hot owned.
Hot owned.
Hot owned by Belgians.
well, since we all are drinking the Kansas City Craft Brewers Red Lager, you know, we can get through that section, and let's introduce ourselves with some of the recent media we've been consuming. Anybody want to start with that?
I can start. Hi, this is Jamie. What have I been consuming? That's a great question. Brian and I just started Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime Video. And it's cool. We've watched 2 episodes, but I really like it so far. It's funny. We also, since the last episode, watched all of Russian Doll,
Oh my God,
which is
Wanted to see this.
Russian
so
Doll
Oh, it's so
good.
fucking good.
is so good.
It's-
I love
Oh,
her in.
It's so
and
Orange is the
good.
New Black.
Yeah.
She's great.
She's insane in that. Like, it's so, I can't even.
I watched the whole show in like 2
Is that
days.
Netflix?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
It's
not enough
phenomenal.
praise for that show.
We watched the first 3 like spread out because it was in the middle of the week, and I think we watched the end of the 3rd episode on a Friday, and we just watched the rest of it because we were like, something happened at the end that we're just like, oh my God.
Yeah, we were like, we have to know.
that we have to finish this right. It's only 8 episodes,
It's
30,
the whole
30
thing
minutes
Yeah.
feels almost like a movie. Like it's just a movie.
Yeah, like a 4-hour
it's like a long
movie.
movie.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a long movie, and I don't know. It's just It just
It's
all
so
feels like a
good.
long movie.
Yeah.
You can't watch. I feel like you can't watch it in too many segments.
Yeah. It's awesome, and they're doing season 2 also, which was
Yeah.
crazy.
Sick.
Sick.
Sick, dude.
outside of that, I've been rereading The Crucible for the 87th time. So
Also sick.
yeah, it's very exciting. I really love it. My kids my juniors are reading it, and they genuinely really like it this year. Like they're feeding into my nonsense.
Oh,
where,
it's such a good feeling.
like today I told they had a pop quiz over Act 2 today, but I told them as I was passing it, I was like, guys, I'm sorry, the devil conjured a quiz for you, and here we are. I was like, you can't blame me because it's the devil.
Call the devil
is
if you have a
amongst
question.
us.
But then somebody called me the devil,
Oof.
and that
Oh.
Backfire.
No.
Backfire.
Detention
me.
immediately.
I was like, excuse me, I'm just one of his pawns. Leave me alone. But that's most of what I've been doing.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I am a slave to my education, so I've been consuming next to no media. I would love to start Fleabag.
Same.
We
Lots of good
almost did
things.
that. That was
Yeah, I would like to watch that.
Yeah,
one of the 2.
so I think that'd be great. When I can do that, reading textbooks for classes and reading Of Mice and Men with my juniors right now, and A Raisin in the Sun with my sophomores. and it's been great. Candy's dog just died, so it's a rough time. Spoiler.
Sick.
But not the biggest spoiler.
A classic spoiler.
Not so sick. Not so sick. I had a couple kids cry. It's fine. So yeah, it's been good. It's been fun.
Interesting thing, just side note really quickly, just before this episode we were watching Good Mythical Morning, and they had a question that they were asking people where like you could push a button, kill all the cats in the world, and like save everybody from everything else.
It was specifically
like
end
global
warming and save the planet.
And a ton of people
but
did that.
You have to kill all the cats.
Yeah, so a ton of people, I'm just going to make this quick. A ton of people did that, and then they were like, just as like a thing, we also tried it with dogs, and like fewer people did it. It was like very close to the line of like,
That doesn't surprise
I don't know.
me.
So anyway,
Dogs
the
are better.
dog
It
thing.
makes sense.
Yeah, so anyway, go ahead.
Sorry, I took a break.
Sick. Sorry.
Sit-
I
Cut it
don't want to get into that before we talk about this
Right.
book because it's just
It's not
yeah,
sick.
yeah, not sick.
Different sick.
This is Danny. I've been watching a lot of Shameless exclusively,
I'm
and
interested.
it's a lot. It's hysterical. I love it a lot. It takes place in like in the south side of Chicago, and it's great. I love it. What else? Oh, I've also been listening to Pod Save America recently, just about like impeachment and other
Yep.
stuff and whistleblowers.
Why, though?
And,
Why?
Oh yeah, no, nothing's happening in current events, but I've just been listening to Pod Save.
Merriam-Webster's tweet. Guess what the number
Also
one?
defining things
Yeah.
specifically. And another show. I started Saturday night. I hung out with Brian and Jamie told me to read Death of a Salesman and gave me the book, and I'm halfway done. And I have Act 2 to read.
It's so good.
It's so good. I love it.
It's so good. Speaking, that's another Arthur Miller play. Look
Yeah.
at that, Crucible.
Per
Death
Jamie,
of a Salesman.
for the Crucible, I'm reading, because she's reading the Crucible, I'm reading Death of a Salesman, and I'm also finished Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is like a 2018 hit book that people said you should read, and it's sad
My
as
favorite
hell.
genre.
It's sad as hell. I read it in like a day, and it was depressing, so I don't know. If you want to feel that way, then you should read it. And anything else? I don't think I'm reading it. I finished. No, that's all. That's
Nice.
it. Going out with a bang. That's
I
it.
finished. Yeah, that's them.
That's all.
I have 2 books that I'm reading currently that have spawned from kind of random circumstances, both music related. I've been watching a ton of documentaries about musicians and bands, and eventually one of them led me to a Grateful Dead documentary. So I've been watching a ton of those. Also on TC, they talk about Time Crisis. Sorry, guys. They talk about Grateful Dead a lot, and so the Grateful Dead have bluegrass phases, and so I've been kind of like playing bluegrass music and getting into all of that. But also on the other end of things, they were a part of the late 60s acid tests. The Grateful Dead was where they were the house band for like all these experiments in California. And so I'm reading the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which follows Ken Kesey, who is the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because
Is
he
it
was like,
Kesey?
I think so,
say that?
yeah.
Which I'm also reading, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm halfway through One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That book is crazy. I did not know what to expect. It's very like experimental in style, but also like touches on some pretty interesting like modern philosophy.
It's a little Kurt Vonnegut-y,
A little bit.
I feel like. I
Yeah.
don't know.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah, that yeah.
Yes, One Flew Over
But
the
he's
Cuckoo's
talking about the
Yeah, I'm
acid.
talking about
Sorry.
yeah.
One
Electric
Flew Over the
Acid.
Cuckoo's Nest is a little Kurt
Yeah.
Vonnegut-y.
Yeah.
So and it's cool because it's like following along, though it's an experimental novel, it's like following along real events, which were also crazy. It blows my mind that stuff like that went down. But at the time, the acid was legal, so they were just doing legal things.
The acid.
The acid. And then the other thing, I've been taking guitar lessons and playing a lot of jazz, and so I put together a playlist of a lot of classic jazz standards that I have been playing. And I have been trying to find singers singing them to learn the melodies better, because when singers sing instead of an instrument playing, the melody's more pure. And one of the people that I keep getting is Billie Holiday, because she's just pretty straightforward and she has a beautiful voice.
Not
And
Billie Eilish.
Not Billie Eilish.
To clarify.
Billie Holiday was the original call girl. No, so basically the book is about Billie Holiday.
I want Billie Eilish to do an album of classic covers
She'd
of
kill it.
standards, jazz standards.
That would be interesting.
I want
kill
that.
it.
Yeah.
she'd
I
do
do
great.
think that she would kill it. Billie Eilish, if you're listening.
Billie Eilish covers Billie Holiday. Billie covers Billie.
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Billie on Billie.
Billie on Billie.
Billie,
Billy on Billy
I'm
action.
down.
So regardless, the book is Billie Holiday, the musician and the myth, and the book is focusing on debunking Billie Holiday's own like myths about herself. She had a lot of books, or she had one autobiography and other biographies written about her, and she kept telling different stories, and a lot of it is very sad, but also people can't really tell how true it all is. And so this book is from 2015 and is like taking every book, article, whatever that's ever been written and tries to navigate what actually is true, which is kind of an interesting concept for the book, to look at other books while telling the story about Billie Holiday, the singer. So that's been the deal. A couple books. And with
Nice.
that, we have another book that we have all just finished. We're moving into the main meat of the program.
Here
This
we are.
is
The main meat.
The main meat.
No.
The main meat.
All right, we need to be somber now, everybody.
Yeah, no, this is...
So
Excuse me.
this is the back half of the Underground Railroad, and we'll get a summary kicked off from Jamie.
Yeah. So where we left off in our first episode, Cora had just made it to North Carolina. She escaped South Carolina right before there was a raid, essentially. But Caesar didn't make it out. Cora is with a family that is very scared because North Carolina is terrifying and will immediately murder any black person that they see.
And this family was also not in the game anymore.
Yeah, they thought that their segment of the Underground Railroad had closed and it was no longer open for business. But they take her in, much to the wife's dismay. And she has to live in an attic for a while. While she's up there, she's watching just like horrible atrocities out the window of these people, like every Friday having a party and hanging someone.
And like an attic where she's like laying flat.
Yeah, like she has no
She's
space.
not like walking around.
Yeah, the thing that she's looking through is like a very
Peephole.
small peephole,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like that's supposed to be her one saving grace, and like it gets ruined.
Yeah,
very
and
quickly.
she has like a couple books, like the Bible and an almanac, to keep her company, and she has to be absolutely silent because their maid, who comes every day, would definitely turn her in if she heard that they were harboring a fugitive. But she gets kind of comfortable in the routine there, but then one day she gets really, really sick, like unconscious, sick, fever. And so the married couple tell their servant girl that they are sick, so she can't come for a few days, and they try to get her better. But in that time, their maid person helps somebody like with a clue that they might want to raid that house, the slave catchers. And so she is again caught on her journey.
By Ridgway, who we kept seeing the build up to. He finally came to get her.
Yeah, the complicated character of Ridgway, who started out kind of sympathetic. Like the very first chapter, we're introduced to him when he's like a young kid. You're kind of like, oh, maybe he's fine, and then he turns really terrible. But Ridgway captures her. He starts to take her. Directions are bad. West. He takes her west because he needs to make another stop before he takes her down south to Georgia. In that time, a few different things happen, but essentially they make it to Tennessee. and some other like former slaves or just freed black men kind of ambush Ridgeway because they see Cora all chained up, and they save her and leave Ridgeway in a field. They take her to Indiana, where she lives on a farm, which the name of I will forget.
The
Valentine Farm. That essentially is like a safe haven for a bunch of former slaves.
As utopian as it can possibly be.
Yeah, kind
in
of like
this era.
Like it's like a weird comparison to the plantations that she's worked on before, because they're all still working like for a plantation essentially, but they are free to do as they please outside of that. As long as they help out, they like can go into town and
can semi-choose their work.
Yeah, they can choose their work a little bit, and also they can leave at any time. Like they're not but it is still kind of like a weird indentured servitude state. And then that farm is sabotaged. There are theories as to who created the raid or encouraged the raid of the farm, but essentially they're having a big meeting one night, and a bunch of white men from the town come and start shooting people. Within that, Cora had a significant other, again, whose name?
Royal.
Thank you. There's so many names, and but Royal is shot and dies in Cora's arms, and then right as that is happening, Ridgeway comes in again, kind of seemingly out of nowhere. Like it had been a while that she'd been at that farm, and she thought that he was kind of done for. Like his reputation was ruined, and nobody had really heard from him. And also her owner in Georgia had died at that point.
So his only skin in the game is like
just vengeance.
Gamesmanship a little bit. It's just like, I need to do this for my own.
Yeah, because her
personal
mother,
gain.
quote unquote, got away. So he has like a personal vendetta against Cora. But he comes in and takes her again. He says that, or they overheard Royal talking about the line of the Underground Railroad that's nearby, and so they make Cora take them to that line, and then Cora kind of like tackles Ridgeway down the stairs, and he gets like a brain injury, it sounds like, because he doesn't really remember what's happening.
Sucks.
And Cora gets away on a hand cart thing. That's a lot of information. Also in there, a lot of different things are revealed about different characters. The main thing being that Cora's mother did not actually escape. She was free for about a night, and then she was bit by a snake and died.
On her way back.
Yeah. She decided to go back because
Brutal.
of Cora.
It was
Ever.
the worst.
That was probably
worst.
one of the hardest parts to read. That's a general summary.
Yeah.
That was good.
For sure.
There's a lot, but
General consensus met.
yeah, that's where we are.
Definitely.
Sounds pretty good.
Okay, so for discussion purposes, I wanted to start out with just initial reactions, or like your favorite thing from the book now that it has been finished. Just sort of like go around the circle and say the thing that stuck out to you the most, or something that you kept going back to. Because I kept thinking about one thing, so I'll start. You guys can think. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
I think the biggest.
Oh, I was gonna start.
Oh,
but-
sorry. Well, I'm just wanted the book anyway, but go ahead.
The thing that I wanted to start with was I felt like this happened a little bit in the first half of the novel as well, but in the second half is in the second half, something that was really prevalent, something that stuck out to me a lot, was how quick the tragedy was every time it happened. Like, I felt like every single time that there was a really, really horrible thing, like anytime Ridgeway showed up or somebody died, right before that, you were lulled into such a sense of security. Like, and it would be like a sentence where suddenly would have to reread it because I didn't realize what was happening. Like, especially the first time that Ridgway comes to the house in North Carolina, and Cora is like, oh, the bed, one more night in the bed. And then she hears a noise downstairs, and then he grabs her from under the bed, and it's like 2 sentences to prepare you for, oh no, this is happening. And I just felt like that happened over and over again, where I was lulled into like, oh, she's happy again. And that's so nice. That's so good. And then there would be 2 sentences that would just absolutely destroy my world. And it happened over and over and over again that just, I am amazed by that craft from Colson Whitehead. Like, I don't know how I could write something like that just brings you in and tears you down so quickly. I thought that the writing was just really good in that sense, even though it hurt a lot. But that was the thing that kept sticking out to me. So you guys can either comment on that, or we can move on to somebody else's thing.
You go.
I just think the thing I liked the most, I think the structure of the whole story was so well done. I really liked the back and forth between what was essentially like a short story almost, because it did take you out of the main trajectory of the story by going into other characters' backgrounds. Because while a lot of that was pertinent information, oftentimes it'd be taking place in a different period of time. And so it was just really nice to kind of, first of all, have world building in that way, because even with minor characters, we may get to it. This is one we were talking about. Even with Ethel in the house, how she had even a conflicted relationship with having Cora in the attic in the first place, and her story could have ended there. We still got a look into more of her past to see why she feels the way that she did, give some more illumination into her thoughts on a lot of societal things overall, because she had a conflicted relationship with kind of the ownership aspect of slavery, because she saw, I think, was it the daughter of a servant of the house?
Something with a J, but her father's
right.
servant's daughter.
So it was, just really interesting to be able to get that, even though she wasn't the main source of that. And I think it was all epitomized in a really great way of, like, we got a lot of these really great short stories, and one of the best one was with Mabel at the end, and it even felt grander to me because we had talked about how the fact that we liked the very first sentence of the entire novel, where it was the first time Caesar approached Cora about running north, she said no. It communicated a lot there. And then we get to the chapter with Mabel, which is huge because not only is it a motivator for Cora, Mabel's actions, but also for Ridgway. So this chapter feels like it carries some inflated importance, and it starts out with another really impactful, heavy first sentence of the first and last thing she gave to her daughter were apologies, and it really brought you into her own story, because all you heard of it was kind of through Cora's recollection. So, we get deep into Mabel, and then it hits with one of the most, like, emotionally impactful moments of the entire novel, especially because it circumvents expectations in a really good way. It wasn't like a tropey thing. It was like a genuinely devastating thing, especially from the fates of 2 of the main characters of the novel and how that affects them. I just think that all those short stories were super crucial to creating the overall effect of the novel. I think that those were really well done, and it was just so great that that final chapter of the shorter chapters was also probably the best one in my opinion. So
yeah. To segue off that, because that was mine as well, were these tidbits that we got, and I think they were well placed after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm looking at the second half, and Ethel, Caesar, and Mabel, all deceased characters, and like we know these things about them, and especially Ethel's part when she came up, I'm like, okay, what could we know about this woman?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of this abrupt change of heart that I didn't look into. until I read about her. I'm like, oh, cool, she's
Right.
taking care of her. I didn't ask myself like why that would be when she was so opposed to having her there the entire time. And so I thought just placing that afterwards was really good. The Mabel, I think you pretty much hit everything on that, but I agree, just the style of doing it afterwards and having those stories to empathize like with those characters more.
I will say on that note, the one chapter that was like that bothered me a little bit. I don't know. Like, I think it's well done, but also, speaking of me just being taken aback by things being so subtly mentioned that are just horrific, I loved Caesar so much in the first half. And when his death is first mentioned, it's kind of like word of mouth. Cora doesn't really react. It's like very quickly like, oh yeah, and that boy that you were with, like, yeah, they killed him immediately, whatever. And then it moves on, and then suddenly there's a chapter that's called Caesar, and I was fully expecting it to be like, they think he's dead, but he made it out. Like, I was kind of pissed because he still died, but it comes afterwards, and so, like, I think that circumvented my expectations of, like, he's fine, because we didn't really know. Yeah. We weren't there, and that kind of made me angry. I understand the craft of it. But
I also wanted more to that story in general. Like, it was just brushed upon, and he was such a vital character in the first half, and then he just kind of, like,
I was downward. Surprised at that.
Yeah, it felt weird to, like, turn to that chapter and, like, only have a few pages worth of his, like story. And I also was, like, kind of angry about, like, Caesar's. Maybe that was the point. I don't know. But just, like, feeling like Caesar's story wasn't really fleshed out as much as it could have been. But my, like, the thing that stuck out to me the most throughout the whole book was her, like her desire to, like, learn and her desire to read. Like, she, throughout all of her different, like, types of imprisonment, like, she was just, like, constantly striving to, like, find a book, find anything, and read. In North Carolina, like, I was just picturing her, like, in, like, the heat with, like, the tiny window, like, with a little reader, like, trying to, like, learn her, like, letters and words. And that was, like, I don't know, it was this very small thing, but her persistence to, like, educate herself was super super poignant to me.
On that same note, do you guys think that there is a specific purpose or reason why Whitehead chose to make her main like joy in reading came from almanacs, which is an interesting choice. Like, it's not the most engaging reading material, I would say, but maybe it represents something about, like, structure in her life. Or I tried to think of like even she liked reading the ones that were about previous years. Like, it wasn't even like she got to see the future until the very end, but maybe something in the idea that something in the world could make sense, maybe.
Yeah, I think for the almanacs, first of all, it's just part of this that made me enjoy the story overall so well, because Colson Whitehead was very good about including purposeful minor details. And in the case of the almanac, like, part of that to me was, first of all, just having a great resolution of where it also progresses along with Cora, that she's reading these previous editions, that, you know, what other book could she read that she'd be able to have a progression where there's this new one that means so much, but the almanac being a yearly thing, it hits so much heavier when she gets this new edition, the spine cracks. Like, it was a cool continuation of something that was seemingly so minor previously. So I think it was just cool for that as, like, a good resolution for Cora in the midst of a lot of horrors. And also, I think a lot of it too is that she's so engrossed by something that's so plain, and it kind of highlights what she's lacked a little bit, that, like, she hasn't had the ability to read. So even an almanac that most people would find boring is, like, this huge thing to her, which I think is kind of telling from that aspect of it as well, that that she would be so into that. I think that that's part of it too, is like having a seemingly boring book that she's into just highlights a lot of the fact that like, hey, she hasn't had like anything else to read, that like it's cool that she's getting something now because she's even enthralled by an almanac. So I think a couple of those things, but I also just think as a storytelling device, it was just really great to have that minor progression in the story itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's valid. It's a nice thing to keep having, and like when she gets the new one that's like the future, it's kind of foreshadowing her future a little bit, that it's bright and fresh and new. Maybe we don't really know. Right. That's another thing I want to talk about, is that at the very end, my understanding of the last chapter of the book, we start each chapter or certain sections with the slave ads, like runaway slave ads, at the beginning of the chapter. And I did look in the acknowledgments. Colson Whitehead says that those are like historical. He found them in some database of the time period. But the very last one is finally Cora's. But it's not maybe literal, or maybe it is, or maybe, I don't know. It ends with, she has stopped running. Reward remains unclaimed. She was never property. Which I think is an interesting way to open that chapter, but maybe I'm just cynical. Because so often, like, she has so many of those moments where you're lulled into safety, and then it's torn down in such extreme ways that I feel this last chapter, like, we don't really know where she ends up. Like, she gets into a wagon with a man who seems nice. He's going to Missouri, and then off to California, I think. And that seems promising, but I don't trust it at all. So did you guys feel like it was a happy ending for Cora, or is there another tragedy just around the bend? Like, is that slave, runaway slave ad supposed to tell us that everything ends up okay, or?
So consistently, we've obviously been let down. So the cynic in me wants to say there's more to it, probably. But also she's in a much better location with what seems to be a group of people, and some are white, so she's more protected, potentially. So part of me thinks that that's just like the end. The further north, the safer she is, and so maybe this is like it. I'm not sure.
But I feel like at the farm, she was also protected, and there were...
But they were a threat. That was a threat,
There was a threat, but there were also on the farm, like, some white people or white adjacent people who were, like, helping the cause.
I think a thing that's interesting, though, in this case is, and especially interesting given the title of the chapter, is that they're going west. Like, her journey has been north this whole time, and a lot of the issues of the era are with the north versus the south. But in looking at the actual geography, it's like eastern United States, north versus the south.
Yeah, she never makes it north.
And
like,
so,
really, truly north.
But that's the thing, is that she's now heading west instead. Like, a lot of it is this steady journey up. And so I think that even the fact that that's different kind of says something to me, and that, you know, she's heading to a place that's removed, and also from where American history kind of goes is like the new frontiers, California. A lot of great things happen in the beginning of California, a lot of opportunity in California, like with the gold rush and everything else. I think that it is very interesting that it's particularly this wagon is going west. It's not like we're going to keep going north. We're going to go north until we're in the northernmost point and there's no south anymore to deal with. I think that, like, that to me feels like it's very intentional.
I don't know. I almost feel the opposite. Like, I feel like as like a white person, I want to be like, oh, and then it was happily ever after. She went west and she lived in California amid the palm trees. Like, I kind of feel like I want it to be like Like, she met this guy and, like, they traveled west and it was a utopia and it was manifest destiny and it was, you know, like, I really, like, I feel.
She says, manifest destiny?
I mean, I do. I feel like I want it to be that, but I don't. I think that there has been so much of, like, I feel like it's almost like a cycle. Like, the good thing happens for like a few seconds and you like read a few sentences and you're like, oh, she has a warm bed and she's like with a nice white family who's like gonna take care of her and gonna protect her, and then everything gets fucked up like again and again. And I feel like I don't know what happens. I don't purport to know what happens, but I feel like the implication is that this is a cycle that's like gonna keep happening. Like, she's just gonna keep running. She's gonna like live in fear continually, and like, not to be so cynical, but like that's like, I feel like something that was a reality for a lot of people. So I don't know, I feel like it just felt very cyclical. It felt like it could, like, this ended at a point where like it could have ended 100 pages before it or 100 pages after it, and it just like felt like it could have just kept going. Like, she met new people and like it was very exciting and like very like, oh, like maybe they're gonna harbor me and they're gonna like protect me, and then like she keeps getting found, or she keeps getting, I don't know, exposed.
Yeah.
But the ad does say
No, yeah, you're
she
right.
stopped writing. I don't know. I mean, I think that's our little something to hold on to.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
maybe.
Do we think that that's tainted at all? This is a new thought in my brain, so maybe it's not real. But the chapter right before that, immediately before that ad, is where we find out about her mother.
Yeah.
And her mother, like, kind of has this moment of clarity and is like, okay, I experienced something outside of the plantation, but I need to go back for my daughter. And she like finally feels kind of like content almost in that moment of like, I know that I did this and I can tell Cora about it. And then she dies. And it's another like anticlimactic moment of like, we think that we don't, because we know she doesn't come back, but something good might be happening. And then she dies. And then immediately after that, we're led into Cora's ending. That maybe like, is there supposed to be a parallel there? Like, is Cora going to just like think that everything's good and then it turns out bad, or is she pushing beyond the point that her mother ever could?
There's been this consistent parallel between the two. They've been compared so many times. Your mother got away from me, or I needed you because of your mother, and you were the locomotive. And she's obviously proved, like, we found out that she's much more than. Like, she wouldn't have turned around. She didn't turn around for Lovey, and she didn't turn around when she could have, as Mabel did. So I think they've been separated at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the ending of, like, is it a happy ending? We kind of touched on this last episode, but, like, how could it possibly be?
Yeah.
Because regardless of what happens, there's still horrific things happening in the country anyway. And I think one of the things I had even said is like, well, what's the most ideal ending is like we get a flash forward to 4 generations down the line and like Cora's kids are cool and like free and safe, but like that's just not an option. So it's like, how happy can it even be? Even with Mabel herself, as sad as it was, there was still the silver lining of like, you know, we looked at the book through a generational lens because we saw Ajari and then Mabel and then Cora, but when Mabel was dying, she was almost content to have gotten as far as she did. Like, that was progress in and of itself to get out of the farm and get to where she did, even though obviously she wanted to go back and see Cora. There was some contentment, and it's not a happy story, but it's like progression in that way. So like, yeah, it is hard to say that the story overall is like a happy ending, even from what we have and like what the possibilities are. But at least it's like leading in to like Cora got farther than her mother did, and hopefully like she can pass that along. Because no matter how long she survives, hopefully like this thing with this guy pans out. Obviously, history says it might not, because the other guys have had tragic ends. But like, it is hard to say that it's just like a happy ending, because how could it be?
Valid.
Yeah.
You don't think that Cora is like the great grandmother of Barack Obama or something?
Barack Obama's great-great-grandmother is Irish. Maybe.
I think that's his grandfather, actually.
Okay.
Anyway, speaking of stories being fleshed out or happy or whatever, we talked a little bit about Caesar, and maybe some of us or all of us were a little unhappy with how Caesar's story ended so abruptly. Were there any other characters that you guys really wanted to know more about, or felt like weren't given their due justice? Or maybe who were, like, characters that you just really, really liked, even though they were brief blips? I want to know more about Royal. I knew it was going to happen because I kept being lulled into such a sense of stability and happiness, but I was just so excited about Cora and Royal's relationship.
Same, honestly.
Like,
Yeah.
she was finally felt like she was opening up to somebody, and they kissed and they cuddled, and it was so good. And then just so abruptly he died, and I want to know so much more about him as a character because he seems so sweet and good and pure. But I don't know if there's other characters. We talked a little bit about Ethel. I feel like Ethel is an interesting character.
She's an interesting character.
I feel like I would want to know more about Ethel. Like, I feel like there was like one chapter kind of only dedicated to her, and I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I would have liked to have learned more about her. She very much wanted to like we talked about, I don't know if it was the last episode or just before this episode, but like she wanted to take care of Cora. She like wanted to convert Cora. She wanted to sleep with Cora. Possibly. Like, I don't know. I feel like I would have liked to have like flushed that out and like learned more about her.
I think, go ahead.
I felt pretty content.
All right.
But
With Ethel?
Hot take.
no, with the
Just everyone.
with the characters in general. But out of all of the characters that I found interesting, that, you know, if there could have been any other information, probably the boy that was with Ridgway.
Yeah.
Mm.
Homer.
Oh, yeah.
I thought out of anybody
For sure.
else, it was just such a complex relationship there, and it wasn't truly fleshed out. Like, it just felt so weird that this boy continued to be so loyal in the midst of everything else that's going on. I think that out of all the characters, to me, he felt like he had the most mystery, but I can't remember what his name is. Homer, that's right. Yeah, because he came back multiple, because it wasn't he the one that even tipped it off
He like
the
winked
second
at
time
Cora.
around. Yeah.
Right, so like he just feels no shame in his part in all of this, obviously, because he's being playful on the eve of this horrific event that he has presumably triggered by confirming that Cora's there, and Ridgway's obviously there because Cora is, because that's his like main prerogative at this point in the novel. But like, I just think that it just doesn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me. Maybe the mystery is a good thing, because like I said, I felt pretty content with where everybody's stories really ended, even Caesar. But I think that one was one that just still has me scratching my head, that it was just, he was the most mysterious character out of anybody.
I think it makes sense. Like, I understand why he's with Ridgway, because he was basically abandoned and Ridgway gave him his freedom, and it was like this only father familiar figure he had. I don't think he was very old.
Bummer.
No, I think he was super
Right.
Yeah.
Dad of the year, Ridgway.
Yeah, right.
But I think he was just so easily manipulated, and Ridgway is so callous, and I think that rubbed off on Homer, and so he just was also a very callous character to me. Like, he
Yeah.
just didn't care.
Which
He just
sucked.
went along with
It
what
sucked.
Ridgway wanted,
Yeah.
and he just was like, I'm safe. I have Ridgway. Like, I have my own protection, and
Well, he was almost like doing what he needed to
survive.
survive.
It
Like,
was
he
survival.
just-
But that's the thing, is like that's true, but he also took on this air of like playfulness about it still.
His
Like he was
dress
just
and
he was just
his-
having like fun to some degree in certain instances, that it was like,
Yeah, it felt
Like, I-
very demented.
like
it's
it-
Yeah,
creepy.
like a
right.
character.
Like, it definitely
Yeah.
was a survival thing, and like you
It
got that
reminded
sense,
me-
but it was like also this other layer where he was just like, I'm kind of liking this, which was just like, it was a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
It reminded me also, now that you said the word demented, and it made me think of the character in the movie Get Out. Have any of you seen
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
I sing it out.
So, like, the guy who like
the straw hat guy.
Yeah, the straw hat black guy who
Yeah.
like was in. That's what it made me. That when you said
Yeah.
demented, that's what it made me think of. Where he's like almost deluded into or like brainwashed into. Like I've heard. This is racist. I'm just gonna say it. But like some people, like I feel like a racist argument for, like I don't even know. I don't know. But like I feel like I've heard a racist argument that is like, well, black people held slaves too, or black people did this or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's just like, first of all, that's rude. But also like like he feels brainwashed. He feels like demented in some way. Like he's just like surviving. He's like he's doing this for his survival, and it feels very odd because it feels not like it's not right, but also like he's just doing what I don't know. I feel like he's been brainwashed by Ridgway.
Yeah,
Into being his like weird little sidekick or something.
And what sucks about that is now Ridgway's dead.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Right.
And maybe he's not. He's probably messed up pretty badly.
At the very least, very hurt.
But
and
that's his ticket into being a part of this world. And now, like, as much as you can see some, like, maybe sympathy with Ridgway for even allowing this boy to, like, have a future in this country, it becomes so much more sinister after the fact because when Ridgway's gone, this kid has no ability to revert back to, like, this is the way things are, because to him as a young boy, that's the way things are, but that's not the way that they can be anymore.
yeah.
And so, like, his ending is also one that's, like, very understated, but also pretty devastating, too.
Yeah, I think every time I picture him as just, like, theatrical. Like, he was not in reality, even from, like, the sign that he was holding, like, when he first was picked up, to the suit and the like, everything about him seemed like he was just in his own play and world that was not the world that he should exist in.
Yeah.
And it's probably like this moment that hits him that like you said, I have to exist now.
Yeah.
After I was a
And
piece
how?
of shit. Like,
Yeah.
I also, maybe this was just me, but genuinely this thought came into my brain while I was reading the sections specifically with like Homer and Ridgway interacting. I felt almost like Homer was like in love with Ridgway, like in a weird way. Like there's no evidence of like any weird sexual undertone, but like so much of like the way that he like so earnestly and excitedly writes down Ridgway's thoughts, like as Cora's getting away.
yeah.
At the end, like it's like a weird like obsession, and like something about it feels romantic almost, and I don't know how to describe that. I also think that Ridgway as a character around like sex things is fascinating because he wants this like slaves, Cora specifically, to hurt and to go to this terrible existence, but every time a guy in his like party tries to like have sex with Cora or rape Cora or do whatever, like Ridgway gets pissed, which is such a weird thing about his character. I don't know how to unpack that.
I also thought it was strange, but I didn't know if that was just the logistics of she doesn't have change. She's obviously smart. Like, I didn't know if that was don't rape her because rape or don't rape her because she's going to get away and you're drunk type of thing in that instance.
Yeah.
But I feel like there were other parts where he was weird about even men looking at her. Like, he turned them down right away and was like, go away, like at the bar, I think, maybe, or somewhere.
Like, weirdly possessive about her, but also he never tried to touch her.
Right.
Yeah, it almost seemed like an abusive relationship. Like, he thought they were in a relationship of some kind or something, and because he was always very possessive of her.
And
like,
kind of weird, like weirdly protective. It's
right.
Like,
but not attracted to her at any point.
Thing, is that, like, protective feels very weird because it was like, she can't be abused, but like the only way she can be abused is if I do it. Like that's the only, or like the only way she can
or
be treated
if
is
her owner does.
Yeah,
like once I give you back, then they can do whatever they want.
I mean, it is like an emotional relationship in the sense that like he is very obsessed with her particularly. It's not a normal like slave catcher mindset. It's like Cora. it's not slaves. It's like I
Yeah.
need Cora. Cora's gonna make it. This is what my life is now. Like he was so about that I feel like that kind of
He was
informs a
obsessed.
little bit.
He was like
Yeah.
obsessed
Yeah,
with
it's
her.
like an ego
Yeah.
thing with him.
But that still doesn't. I still don't understand why he got upset when other men tried to do things with her or look at her.
Like can't mess with his prize.
Possession, yeah, his.
I don't know. I don't understand that. His character is very confusing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Well, final thoughts, everybody? I can start with my final thought. This is mostly unrelated to the discussion that we've had, but I don't know if anybody else read the acknowledgments on the last page.
I did not. I will admit that right now.
I feel like, Brian, you out of anybody would really appreciate the last part of the acknowledgments. So he talks about, like, the normal people that you thank, and then he talks about the runaway slave advertisements. But then the last few sentences, he says, the first 100 pages were fueled by early misfits, Where Eagles Dare, Fast Version, Horror Business, Hybrid Moments, and blank mass dead format. David Bowie is in every book, and I always put on Purple Rain and Daydream Nation when I write the final pages. So thanks to him and Prince and Sonic Youth.
That's great.
I just really appreciated that.
Writing
Fueled.
the end of
Fueled.
of slave era America, listening to Sonic Youth.
Yes, and Prince.
Prince.
I also appreciate the thanking of Franklin D. Roosevelt for funding the Federal Writers Project, and Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs.
Obviously.
Obviously.
I mean, like, we
dude.
should all thank historical figures in all of our
Obviously.
writing.
FDR, obviously.
Thanks, FDR, for your work. I appreciate it.
My good friend, FDR.
My good friend, FDR.
FDR still killing it.
So good.
All these years later.
But on top, like, coming off of that, this is the second book I've read by Colson Whitehead. I've really liked both of them. I think that the way that he structures things is so good. Like, so absurdly good. I don't understand how a book can flow that well and, like, bring you in so easily to a story that is so sad and so complicated. So thanks Colson Whitehead. That's what my final thought is.
Nickel Boys is killing it also.
Yes,
On Goodreads.
I've heard that.
Because we talked about it last time, but I've seen a bunch of people have been reading it, and it's been getting good reviews.
Also, in my classroom, I have a sign up on the wall that says, like, currently reading, and I've had this up there for the past couple of weeks,
You can
and
move it.
I know I can finally change it. But literally earlier this week, this kid, one of my sophomore kids, saw it, and he was like, "What is Underground Railroad about?" And I was like, it's about the Underground Railroad, like, from slave era America. But I was like, but it's really interesting because he made it into an actual railroad, and I tried to explain it to this kid.
Is this another
and
Kyle?
He,
Oh, Kyle.
this kid in particular is
A Kyle.
he's like maybe kind of a stoner,
A Kyle.
and so he was just like nodding along and was like, "What? That
Sure.
sounds awesome! Like, I should read that."
Sick.
And I was like,
We worked it in somehow, baby. Sick.
but yeah, so the youth of America.
Kyle wants to read it. The youth want to read it.
It's sick.
Those are my final thoughts.
The Youth of America. Final thoughts.
Yeah, Youth of America. I was reading this during my plan period because last minute. And my kid was like, "You're reading?" Ew. And had no interest.
Bummer,
so you're one up
You're
on that
a
one.
bummer.
But this was my first Colson Whitehead. Will not be my last. And I look forward to starting Nickel Boys soon. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I was impressed with, like, again, his ability to, like, create a page turner out of such a depressing era of America. Like, I think that it was I finished it so quickly, and, like, I feel like I wanted more. Like, I would have read several more of these. Like, that took place. Like I would have read several more of these books, like from someone like Cora's point of view, and I feel like that's an amazing feat to write something that people want to read about slavery.
And that's not so heavy that you need to like put it down or take a break. But I feel like you can,
Yeah.
It's a page turner. You want to keep reading, even when it's tragic.
And I think that's important. Like, I feel like it's an important balance to find to educate people, like to just continue to like showcase the horrors of the era, but also like keep people reading about it. Like, make it not so horrible that people can't, can just be like, oh, it's too sad, it's too horrible that I can't keep reading. And it's like, no, actually, we should keep reading. Like, we need to keep reading about it. We need to keep being reminded about it. And I think
Youth of America.
The youth of America need to keep reading about it. And I think he really achieved that. Like, he achieved like a horrifying page turner. And I think that's important.
Yeah, as Oprah said, it's heart stopping.
Terrific.
Yeah, also terrific, Barack, but
we don't have FDR thoughts.
What
would FDR say?
You guys,
she called him out. He can't write a blurb. FDR.
I called it a horrifying page turner, and nobody quoted me on the back of the book.
I honestly, though, speaking of blurbs on the front, I think that probably Barack Obama said something more interesting than
just terrific.
Yeah, no, I think he probably called it something else.
Out of context.
But there is a period.
I mean, maybe
That's
that's
a-
all
that's
he
a
said.
full
He
thought.
texted Colson Whitehead just terrific.
Just
My dude.
Barack,
Yo, can I use
Barack,
this?
literally
use this?
anything. Literally send me anything.
So terrific.
It's sick, dude.
Sick, dude.
I thought this book was amazing. I thought it was like really like a masterwork. Like, I was honestly impressed. I thought it was going to be really good. I'm first of all a big sucker for like structural ideas that go throughout a whole novel. So I still was like a huge fan of that short story and then state like back and forth, and that happened the whole time, because it's easy to go away from a structure like that to kind of like take one detour, but he never did. And there was just so many instances where he set up a lot of plot devices, like with the almanac, and it found a way to resolve in a nice way in the middle of the novel. And there were just so many instances of that. And also the fact that we kept talking about how he did such a good job, again, in the middle of the novel, to build up to some kind of like euphoric peak to tear it down. And it didn't ever feel derivative as you were making your way through the novel. It didn't feel like, oh, this again. Like, they were all new, good places to be, that he still found new, interesting, and devastating ways to tear them down again. And so overall, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but this probably was one of my favorite books I've read this year.
Yeah.
In all honesty.
I agree with that.
So I am excited to get into Nickel Boys at some point.
I think that's the correct pronunciation.
Boys.
Hopefully it is also hopefully it also has a Barack blurb.
Neat.
Super great.
Sweet.
But yeah, I was a big fan, and I will be looking forward to not only just Nickel Boys. I think I'll be diving into some more Colson Whitehead, because that was great. So
we own Zone 1.
Yeah, we do.
Already.
It's in the picture of our last podcast.
Sweet.
Boom. So, yeah, that wraps up the Underground Railroad. Thanks for joining us, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
It was a good couple episodes. We will be continuing on next episode with Danny's book, which is going to be
Northwest by Zadie Smith.
Which is also exciting.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people recently on Goodreads reading Zadie Smith.
Sweet.
Not Northwest, but it has been Zadie Smith.
But that's the one we're reading.
That's what we're reading.
That's
so
what
get
we're
ready.
reading. Yeah, so that'll be exciting. And after that, we will have a little wrap-up of the season, which will be a good time. We'll have to remember this Kansas City craft beer, or Kansas City craft brewers. That's a new one.
What a time.
On the list. I was a fan.
Hot owned.
By the way, we never have like
Hot owned, guys.
we never have a wrap-up of the beer when we finish it. Solid beer.
It's pretty good. I want to try the pale ale.
Agreed.
Surprisingly,
Solid can.
the pale
Great
ale.
design.
Solid game.
The pale ale is weaker.
ASMR.
Oh, hold on.
We're so sorry.
Oh God. Okay. So anyway, we will catch you next time. Who wants to scat?
We should all scat.
Agreed.
A squeebadoo. Bob.
This was the Free Jazz Hour, brought to you by NPR. Catch you next time.
Sick.
Bye.